I found out that May was set to be closed on the news. I was at home after work one day. I think I was watching the maybe 9 o'clock or 10 o'clock news, and there was somebody standing in front of a school and said, "The mayor and board of education announces 100 schools to be closed." And I remember seeing a list a little bit later and seeing my school on that list. And I think the feeling was a heart drop. I think I was overwhelmed with lots of emotions, a lot of uncertainty, and certainly anger. I was so upset that the newspaper and the media had found out about my school being closed before me, or maybe even more importantly, the parents and the students that went to that school were supporting young people at that school. And so we all found out. I think I was thinking about my students and parents in that moment too. Just what are they thinking? Are they reading this and seeing this on the news like I am? And I think I was left with a large question mark. Why would they do this to us in 2013? When that happened is 2012. The Chicago Teachers Union was doing a lot of organizing, and an organization I was a part of, Teachers for Social Justice, was also doing a lot of organizing to organize teachers and parents and students to resist school closures. And I'm trying to think about the first action. What happened? I think shortly after that newscast, maybe the same day, Brandon Johnson, who was my union delegate, the current mayor, showed up at my school. He had these little locks and his red t-shirt, and we're crowded around this table in the teacher's lounge. And I remember Brandon saying, "Well, what do y'all want to do? Like, what can we do? What stories can we tell about this school that rationalize it staying open? But also, what sort of actions can we take?" And so I think there was some organizing with teachers through the union, and certainly through Teachers for Social Justice and some of the more radical, maybe education or community-based organizations started to bring people together to engage in more direct action. And so in addition to lots of press conferences, I remember us collecting hundreds and thousands of signatures, marching to the mayor's office. There was a number of protests. One day I got arrested at City Hall. I'm locked in arms with Brandon Johnson again. A number of us, about 20 probably, got arrested. We blocked the elevators at City Hall. I think I was willing to do whatever it took, truly a by any means necessary sort of approach. Because I realized very quickly, I think, that the Board of Education wasn't interested in listening to us. Like, they weren't interested in listening to the cries, the pleas, the anger, the humiliation that so many parents and teachers and students shared as they walked up to those public hearings that the Chicago Board of Education held in communities all across the city. And I think I took that and I put that in the historical context too, knowing that if we look back in Chicago history, Black folks have always had to fight, like literally fight for their education. And I started to move towards more actions that would put people on notice, for lack of a better term, that would gain more media attention because they didn't want to hear us say please. They wanted to come film us getting arrested. They wanted to come film us being loud. And so I think whatever drew attention, I remember at one point we walked out in the middle of LaSalle Street. And it was actually me and a bunch of folks from Cocoa and organizers from Teachers for Social Justice and folks from Northside Action for Justice and folks from Southwest Side Together Organizing for Power. And who else was there? Other Blocks Together. And we all went out on LaSalle Street and just stopped traffic and was like, if our schools get closed, then the city will get shut down. And I remember G2 Brown saying, we doing these call and responses. If we don't get it, shut it down. And so that phrase really has stuck with me, but really galvanized me to engage in the sort of activism and organizing to not just try to save May, but part of that organizing was me understanding that May wasn't the only school, that I wasn't the only Black teacher, that my students weren't the only Black children, that my students' parents weren't the only Black parents being impacted by this. And so we learned about this big Chicago sort of impact. But I also remember connecting with folks from Philly who were experiencing school closures there. They closed 25 schools or something like that in Philly. And us connecting with folks in LA Unified who were also experiencing school closures. And so I think part of that resistance helped me to understand the connections that we had to both school closures, but also the connections we had to resisting those school closures too. So May right now is Leland Academy. So there were 3 schools on the west side: May, Louis Armstrong, and George Leland. George Leland was the early childhood center, 0 to 3. Right down the street from May. Louis Armstrong was built as a middle school, 6 to 8, and May had always been a K-8 school. It was the largest building. It was a big brick building. And so the district did what they call a consolidation. So they consolidated all 3 of those schools into the May building. Everybody was reassigned, I think was the term that they used. And you had to, if you were interested, reapply for your job back at the new Leland school. And the Leland administration maintained their job. My principal got fired, let go. The Armstrong principal administration got fired and let go. And a few people did return back to Leland to teach that were there at May, but I think most of us left. For me, I did get my job back. I think it was just it was too painful to come back to a school not under the May name, and they intentionally hired or put a leader in place that was just known to be really mean and led with a quote unquote iron fist. And I wasn't willing to put myself through more agony following that. One of the things that I found out during my research on May Community Academy that one, it was one of several schools that were built in this sort of in this fashion. One, that there was a main building, but it was built so the building could get bigger, right? So they added a number of additions and the architecture was built like that. But one of the things that's sticking out to me as I'm sharing the story is that May was intentionally built a bit off of the sidewalk. So when you approach May, there's this big front lawn that, unlike schools before it had been built, were right up on the sidewalk. And so May has this front lawn, and that was intentionally built so that the community could use that space, so that students could use that space to play, so that there was this human element to education, essentially, or to the school. And I think I didn't really realize that, but when I found out that piece of information, I started to remember all of the things that I did with my students and families in that front lawn. It was, of course, a couple fights in that front lawn that I remembered, but I remember doing science experiments. Like one day we were studying gravity and we were throwing pop bottles, like full 2-liter bottles, out of the window. And so I have pictures and images and videos of doing those science experiments. We would do all sorts of physics related experiments in the grass. And I remember looking for biological life in the grass with microscopes with my students. And so much of those memories existed just because somebody had built this area for play, for community, for collaboration. And I guess at the end, all of that was lost when they closed that school and when we all left that place. The city of Chicago is a rapidly changing city. What once was a majority Black school district is no longer a majority Black school district. What once was a district full of tens of thousands of Black teachers is now a school district with half, if not a quarter, of those statistics. And so I want um, not just Chicago, but I want young people everywhere. I want Black children everywhere to be able to go to a school in their neighborhood that provides them with everything they need, right? That's academic support, but that's all the stuff that was lost during school closures, all the love, all the care, all the compassion, all the joy, all the humility, all the learning about self, all of the dreaming, all of the joy and creation that existed in schools. I want every Black child to experience that. And not just in kindergarten, not just in eighth grade, not just when they graduate or go to prom or when they get permission to go on a field trip or something like that. I want every Black child to experience that every single day they move from their home or their abode where they're staying at to that place where they spend 180 days, 6.5 hours a day. Right. And largely, I want ecosystems that push and hold people accountable. Those are the people who are funding education. Those are the people who are making money from education through their contracts and curriculum sales, and the folks inside of schools to remember that education is not schooling, that education is not enclosing people's lives. It's actually a opening up of our lives, allowing us to ask questions and take action and become curious and analyze the world around us. As Paulo Freire says, read and rewrite the worlds. I want us to remember that. But I also want us to create mechanisms to actually to build those things. I work with a lot of people who have a lot of beautiful dreams for Black education. And we've been dreaming a lot. And the question I ask is, what does it take for us to actualize those dreams? Maybe that means we listen to the people that have been impacted by this. We listen to Black parents. We listen to Black students. We listen to Black teachers and not shun them as if they're underqualified or they have no say-so in this, but really remember that they were impacted and might be impacted in the future, and they have something valuable to share in both the imaginative, but also in what we might do moving forward. I think for Black teachers, that is on the work of, in some part, their own K-12 experiences. I had a terrible, um, my early experiences, I think, were joyous to some degree because I had Black teachers early on. But as I started to get older, I started to see schools as prisons. And I had that experience. And so I never, ever thought I would become a teacher. What does it mean to create those same ecosystems I described earlier that are full of love and joy and laughter and community and action and justice? So that gives young people an experience that they might want to replicate as teachers. I think if we look back in time, Black teachers became Black teachers because they had amazing Black teachers as students. And so how do we create the mechanisms for Black students to be taught by Black teachers who can model in some sort of aspiration? And not everybody needs to become a Black teacher, but how do we start to create the pipelines for Black teachers when those teachers are students? And if we can create this milieu, then I think we might get more Black teachers who are also conscious teachers, Black teachers who are also from the communities in which they serve, Black teachers who aspire and work really hard to not just plan, but implement all of that joy, that love, that compassion, that curiosity I've been describing. And maybe we get to more of a metaphor like that front lawn of May, something that's more connected, something that's more life-giving instead of life-taking. And so I think I could go on and on about my vision for Black education, but I think it starts with joy, love, laughter, humility, and justice, not just from the outside, but also from the inside, right? And that means that we support people in buildings. We support parents. We support students. We support teachers. We support admin to engage in that justice work and to build their capacity so that they have time to build the important relationships necessary to dream big and then to have the space to experiment, to mess up until they can figure it out